One of the most difficult things you can possibly do is try to tell the difference at times between reproductions and genuine, authentic early porcelains from almost every period. It's very difficult. Is with this example here, this is an amphora vase based on a Tang style that was later copied during the Yongchen and the Qianlong period. A Yongchen Celadon in this form a few years ago sold for about $18 million. This particular example is a brand new modern copy. It is a fake. All right, and when you go to auctions these days, or you're looking at auctions online, you have to understand something. Great rarities like these and a lot of other examples that we're going to talk about simply don't turn up at rural, regional auctions. Whole collections don't get turned over to some auction house that nobody's ever heard of. It simply doesn't happen. It's wishful thinking on the part of the auctioneer to think they can get away with it, and it's wishful thinking on the part of the buyer thinking that they've discovered an auction that no one's going to see that's full of great rarities. It's not going to happen, and you will inevitably end up with a shelf full of copies and reproductions. And this is just one of them. There are lots of them. Here's a Ming example. This is brand new. It was just sold by an auction house down in the Georgia area. It's a reproduction. Here's a picture of the bottom of it. That's not what the bottom of one of these should look like. You see these all the time. People think that they're old. They're not. And this also includes yuan and early Ming pieces especially. You're not going to find a yuan, a blue and white cobalt jar, one of those big ones that are so beautiful, floating around anywhere outside of a museum or a major collection. Simply not going to happen. Same thing for this really, very convincing looking Wan Li garlic neck vase with a dragon on it. This is a copy. Here's a picture of the bottom of it. It's totally wrong. And in a little bit, we're going to get into the bases of Ming porcelains through transitional and Kangxi period, and we're going to look at them, and it'll become very evident what they should look like to you the next time you go out and look. It's not everything you need to know, but it's going to help you. Here's another example. This is an early Ming piece. It is brand new. This is a brand new piece of porcelain, and these simply do not turn up in auction houses across America ever. And I bet I've seen 50 of these in the last couple years. Same thing for this. Here's a picture of the bottom of it. We'll go back to that for a second. This is another typical base. You can actually see up here where they've sprinkled bits of metal onto the paste before they fired it, so it creates iron oxide markings all over it. And you see these little blotches. They look like measles. It's not something you want to see. And then onto this, the copy of the Wan Li jar with this lid. And you notice they've even taken the time to chip the edges of the lid away a bit, rough it up, make it look old. But the problem with this, obviously, is the decoration. The cobalt doesn't have any depth. It's got no life to it. It's just this dead, flat blue. So you don't want to see it. And the bottom is equally dead and flat looking. But to some people looking at this, they'll think, well, it's unglazed. It's a little rough. It must be old. No, that's a new foot. That's a new one. This is a new Jiajing copy. All right. Again, the double gourd form. You've seen them. They're often, nearly always, they do copies in highly recognizable, rare forms. Okay. And this is another one. All right. And here's a picture of the bottom of that. Look familiar. It looks like the other one. And we could go right through them. And of course, they're making lots of copies of these, the 100 deer jars. We'll talk about these types of things when we do the later Qing porcelains. We're not going to get that far today, but just so you know, these are copied in huge numbers. Here is a copy of a Jiajing dragon box, porcelain box. It's pretty good looking from a distance, but you notice that the paste on it doesn't have this bluish tone that you want to see. These pieces always had sort of a bluish tone to the glaze. Here's a picture of the back, this dead white ivory looking area, and then that muddied up foot. All right, and we'll go over here, and here's a real one. That's what the back of this should look like. This one is a Wan Li example. The other is Jiajing, but they were all made within 30 years, 40 years of each other. There's not a big age difference. And again, you see that it has this sort of, almost white as flour foot rim on it. Very white, very clean, nicely done. And then you look at the other thing here, and the paste is unrefined. It's not white, it's tan, and it just isn't right. And also the way the mark was done, the markings are too small. Okay, and then we hop over here. Again, this is a Guangxu type of vase, but these do turn up in huge numbers all over the market. These are reproductions. During the Guangxu period, they were known for making these butterfly vases, and this form was used to make just a few other types of vases with different patterns on them. Typically, they would be cobalt decorated over a cobalt glazed body, rather, with gilding over the cobalt. That was one form. It would be either dragons or little circles, and they're reproducing those. And there's a couple of other forms, but you just want to assume that if you see a pair of these or one of these turn up somewhere around the country, unless you really know what you're doing, assume it's a copy. Authentic examples of these always sell for anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 in pairs for double or even triple that amount if they're very well done. This particular one is pretty well done, but the yellows are too bright. The butterflies aren't very well done. As convincing as they may look upon examination, you'd find that they don't look right. But the general thesis is real pairs of these turn up rarely on the market, and when they do quite well. Same thing for this Wan Li marked jar. Marking period Wan Li jars are quite unusual. They don't turn up very often. And the low quality decoration of this one would have been a provincial jar, and it's highly unlikely a real one would have gotten a mark with that kind of decoration. Here's a picture of the bottom, very out of period, has a real look of modern fooling around to it. It's been dirtied up, and again, it's not white, it's tan. You don't want to see tan bottoms on these. And you have things like this, the copy of the Qinlong Charger with the dragon. These are extremely rare. There's only a few of them in the a few dozen of them in the world probably at this point. And one of the things I wanted to point out was if you look at it up in here, you notice the blue, and a lot of people talk about this type of cobalt, and they call it heaping and piling. And for many years, people said if it's heaped and piled on the cobalt, it's got to be authentic because the modern copyists don't know how to fake heaping and piling. Well, they absolutely can fake it, and they can actually make it look better than the originals because they know that's what people are looking for. Here's a good detail of it, and you see these black areas. Those are the heaping and piling areas, and it's something they can do just by adding extra cobalt and thickening it up a bit, and you end up with that effect. And then you have these very early Ming plates. There's only a few. There aren't many of these in the world, and they were done either in cobalt or done in yellow, and they are extremely rare. And always remember, rare means you're not going to find it, okay, when you say extremely rare. All right, and here is a 100 deer pattern vase, Wan Li period. They made a lot of these for export. They turn up in Europe, but they don't come onto the market often. Here's is a copy of one, and there's a real one. This one is in the British Museum, I believe, and there's a real one. Notice the differences of color. The cobalt is soft. It has a nice fluidity, the angularity of the deer. And here's a copy. The deer are sort of stumbling over one another, and the decorations on the trees here are clumsily done. They're not refined. The way the lines are drawn on the rocks, not good, and so on and so forth. And then here's the bottom of the copy. Again, you see things like these chisel marks around the inside of the base where they added the mark. You notice the circle isn't even really round. It's sort of off. But you look for these chisel marks, these file marks on the edges of the foot rim. Down here, there's a lot of them. If you see this it's supposed to be an early porcelain, you're looking at a copy. It's sort of just how it is. And here's a copy of another Ming jar. Again, the cobalt looks flat, dead. There's no life to it. And here's a picture of the bottom. And again, you see these outward moving lines and all this staining and muck they've added. It's not what you want to see. All right, and now let's take a look at some real examples and talk about them. All right, and now we're going to take a look at some authentic examples, things you're actually likely to come across out there in the world when you're collecting, not something that's such a rarity that you just can't control yourself. because it's important to know what you're looking at. And this is a very nice Ming Jing period charger with geese ascending on it and clouds and so forth. It's beautifully done. And if you move in and take a look, you'll notice the blue has that decided, very deep, almost purple color, very nice and dark. There were lots of colors of cobalt shading that were done at this time, but this is one of them, and it's something you want to look for. And when you flip this over, if you take a look up here at the foot rim, you notice how different the foot on this looks compared to the examples we were just looking at that were all copied. Notice again how white the foot rim, the paste is on this, okay? And you do see some impurities that are natural, and you see little bits of shaping and knife cuts on the foot that you should see. And then on the interior, you have this sort of texture on the glaze under the base. If you look here, you can see it. And those are the little things that make all the difference in the world as far as age of a piece goes, if you're a little bit on the fence about it. But always check the foot rims and the texture of the foot rim. Look for honest knife marks that were made before it was fired, and you shouldn't see any of that muddying on there that you saw on the other pieces. All right, and then we flip over to this. This is a very nice piece of Sometsuki. By the way, these pictures all came from Rob Michaels. He runs that. We did the video on his auction, and these were all things that were just in his last auction. But we're using his pictures because he takes such good pictures. He takes great pictures, and they describe things, I think, quite honestly, and they do a good job. But at any rate, this is a nice Sometsuki piece. It's got the old, Japanese lacquer repair on it. These were made for the Japanese market, but they were beautifully done and very interesting. And this is what these should look like. Notice also a little bit of fritting on the edge around the rim, which is completely normal. And when you flip the piece over, again, do you remember the back of that plate where we saw that sort of texture in the glaze of the Jiajing piece? Well, here you have a little bit later Sometsuki piece, very similar again. And again, that nicely done white foot, that white paste that's showing through all up in here, and little bits of impurities and irregularities, and that bluish tone to the glaze is what you want to see. Okay, and here is that dated jar, beautifully done, 1 Li period, nice deep cobalt blue. Again, the bluish tinge to the glaze. And then when you flip the thing over, here's the bottom, and there's that foot again, that white, that very nice flowery white foot. You can see some edge cutting to it. And what you'll also see is some legitimate iron oxide lines on the bottoms of these. If you look right here, you see that little edge. All right, that's where the glaze ends and the paste begins. A little air gets in there, and if there's any impurity, it's going to pop out as iron red. There's more of it down in here, this iron oxide. That's what you want to see. And again, that bluish tone and little dimples and whatnot in the paste is perfectly normal. And then get on to this, another late Ming jar. Fairly well-known type of export jar. But what's interesting is the base on it. Here you have that nice base again, and here you have the outward spreading of the lines. And here you have these little chisel marks, but you notice they haven't dirtied them up. All right, they're naturally going outward where they cleaned it up on the inside, and it's not been stained. Okay, you don't want to see those outward chisel marks just going on the foot. These start way inside and go out. This is how they cleaned it up. They didn't go in as an afterthought and scrape the foot because they weren't trying to fool anybody. It is what it is. All right. And here's another jar, again from the same period, late Ming, late 1500s, early 1600s. And here is a 1 Li teapot, a particularly nice one. Good deep cobalt blue, nice dark coloring all through it, bluish tone to the paste. The facial expressions are good. The flowers, you can see the layering. It's got a, it's got a real three-dimensional effect to it. And when you toss this up on its backside, here's the foot rim. Again, that same foot again, all right? Few little iron spots in it, but that's normal. But nicely finished, round white paste, and again, that bluish tone to the inside. And again, you look over here, you see a very nice white paste is revealed, and a tiny little bit of iron oxide forming on the edges right here. All right, and that's normal. When you see it in here, when you see it in the open areas, you want to be very leery of it. All right, the only time that really appears is on Ming Celadons and on the bottoms when you flip it over, when it's sitting on those stands when they fire it, and it leaves a fairly large area of iron oxide. All right, and here's another late Ming jar, nicely painted. It's a provincial jar, but it's a good looking one. I like the pattern. It's a well-known pattern. And again, here you have the foot. This time it's got a squared foot, but it's very nicely trimmed. Little bit of iron oxide line running around it. And again, that same bottom. The bases under these tend to be very consistent during the late Ming period, bluish white and little dimples and whatnot, and those are the characteristics you like to see. And here is another Ming jar, 16th century, beautifully done. And here's the underside of that. Again, white oatmeal-y paste. It's slightly tanner in color, but not much. But it's very pure, very nicely done. You see that fine iron oxide line on the edge, not running all over the place. It hasn't been muddied up to convince anybody. You can even see the little turning lines. Sometimes you can see the turning marks on these, which is fun. But the turning marks also turn up on the fakes, so don't use that as an indicator of authenticity. It's just an interesting feature. And you can see it blistered a little bit here and there with the paste while it was being fired. All right, now over to this. Early 17th century cobalt glaze jar. This is the type of jar they would blow the glaze on with straws, so it gave it this sort of these little light and dark, tiny white light and dark spots. Really glowed. And when you flip this over, here's the foot rim on this. Again, neatly trimmed, nice white paste. No iron oxide line on this. This is very finely levigated clay that they used. But you can see where the glaze underneath here on the foot went up and down a little bit. It wasn't perfectly even. But again, you have that nice bottom with little bits of impurities showing here and there. Again, completely normal. And then on to the Wanley 100 Boys box. This was a wonderful example. Again, you have that slightly bluish tone to the glaze. Unlike the Jiajing copy we just looked at. And notice how warm the blue is. Lovely sort of glowing blue. The outlines are done in nice dark blue, almost black and so forth. And when you turn this over, again, there's that bottom, that white foot, that snowy white paste. Very beautifully done. And, of course, the mark was nicely executed as well. Here's a detail of that foot rim to give you a better idea. And there are little bits of white grit in here from the paste, little bits of white paste that got stuck, and all normal. You don't want to take them off if you have them. And but you notice there's been no muddying or dirtying effect to the paste itself. And then you have this. This is a transitional period jar. But nicely done, deep cobalt. It's a provincial jar. These do turn up on the auctions fairly often, but notice the blue has a very rich tone to it, but it's slightly blurry. And you have a squirrel here with the grapes, and the yellow is sort of soft. The red is a nice warm tone. It's not a hot red. It's not cherry red. And then when you turn it over, this is the bottom of it. It's slightly concave. You see some turning lines. This is filthy dirty, by the way. This is not the right color. This was something we had. I never cleaned the foot on it. If you clean this, it would look like the other one. But you'll notice here where it's been rubbing on tabletops and things for a few years, you can see if you clean that, it would turn pretty white. And the outside of the foot is dark. That's probably from a stand. But that's what the foot rim on these transitional pots should look like. Here's a very nice jar that we had the pleasure of selling a few years ago. Beautiful example with peacocks and whatnot. And there's the mark, nice Wanley mark on it. Nicely trimmed foot, nice white paste again. Faint iron oxide line running around the outer edge. And there's a detail of it right here. There it is. You shouldn't see this iron oxide coloring go up and cover the whole foot. This was just where the air hit it between the glaze and the foot during the firing process. All right. And then on to this one, another late Ming example with its lid. Nice looking piece. I forget where we had this. We had this a number of years ago. But a good example with vines and peonies on it. And here's the bottom of that. All right, no muddying, and this was a big provincial jar. This wasn't imperial. This was a jar that was meant for general use, export, whatever. And the clay would sometimes not be as finely cleaned as this, so it was slightly tanner in color, but not tan. Something spilled on it here. This is some sort of old stain. Might have been sitting on something, and that's something that was just stuck to the bottom. I think that was from a stand. But notice how well it's just nicely rounded. It recesses up a little bit. You can see, again, you can see that swirling turning mark in the middle, but good clear paste. All right. And this is another example, a 16th century pot. Nicely decorated. It's got some crackle in the glaze. It's an good old piece. This was actually, when I came across this, it was a table lamp. It had it was a big guan. This thing is huge. And I've owned this for probably 30 years. I just like it. And again, here's the bottom. Yeah, there's the hole from when they drilled it. But here's that paste again. It's not brown. It's just slightly tanned. You remember the other vases, the fakes were completely flat across the bottom with no real good foot rim on it. And it was a tannish brown, sandy color. This is just a light tan color. And again, you have this nicely done foot. You can see it's so smoothed out from age. And again, the iron oxide line just resting right below the glaze, which is where you want to see it. And then on to this, a Jiajing enameled vase with the vines. This was an interesting thing. This vase originally came out of the Skinner auction house decades ago in a box lot. And it had been cut on the top, and it had been drilled in the bottom, but I just loved it, so I bought it. Anyway, the elephant trunks are unglazed. There's no glaze on them. You can see the very distinct luting line in the section in the center where the upper and lower sections were put together. This very elegant sweep, beautifully formed pot. And here's a picture of the bottom. Again, that white paste. This was an unglazed bottom, but you can see you can see the knife mark right there where they trimmed it. They trimmed it in a bit, and then they flattened it over here. But again, that white paste that you want to see. There was also some black Chinese script on here. You can see what's left of it, but I didn't clean that off. It's just the way it was when we got it. And then over here, we have one of these fruit cluster late Ming jars. Here's a picture of the bottom. It was filthy dirty, but again, you have a very rich bluish tone to it. It can get quite blue on the bottoms of these. You can see where it thickened up a bit, and you can see where they cleaned the foot up a little bit with a knife and so forth. This is a provincial jar, so it won't be quite as refined as the others, but that's what they look like. All right, so you can click back through these. You go back and look at some of those. And those are just the Ming and a couple of transitional examples. And now we're going to get into some Kangxi pieces. Before we do the Kangxi pieces, I want to go quickly through some transitional wares too. We had one in the last batch of images, but this is another group. And these are either things that we've had or that Rob Michaels had, and we'll run through them. This is a nice transitional pot. The transitional period was a fascinating time in Chinese porcelain making. The official kilns hadn't been up and running, but the porcelain makers and the potters and the artists kept working. There were not many official orders for things for the palace, so they just made things. And this was something typical of the production they had at the time. And when you flip it over, this is what the bottom of these look like. Again, slightly concave, very nice and white. There was something stained on here. This was probably sitting at some point maybe in a metal bucket or something, or a liner or an under tray, and it got on there. But notice how white and pure the porcelain is over in here. Very, very white, beautifully levigated, very nicely cleaned clay before it was fired to get out the impurities, because when there are impurities in clay, it tends to discolor on firing when the heat gets to it. And here's a big charger, a transitional period with a brown dressing on the rim. And again, you still have that nice soft bluish tone, and the birds are beautifully drawn. The outlining to the flowers are elegantly done. And here's the back of it. And again, once again, you have that knife-trimmed foot, a good double cobalt blue ring around the outside of the foot. And the inside of the foot on this is actually quite white against blue. All right, but it has the little dimples and all the effects you want to see. There's little firing flaws here on the edge of the foot. But overall, the foot rim on this was nice and white, and that's what you want to see. And then on to this, the little double gourd vase. This is a beautiful example. The figures are beautifully done, nice outlining, and then shading in with additional cobalt all through it. Perfectly potted. The potting on this was quite excellent. And here's a picture of the foot rim. Again, beautiful example of the paste. Look how white that is. There's no browning. They didn't, it wasn't stained up. And again, the center is quite blue in the bluish white glaze, but you have that nicely trimmed foot. All right, the way the feet are done, once you've seen enough of these, you'll get it. I assure you, all of a sudden someday you're just going to go, oh my God, I get it. I understand the foot rims. All right, now on to this. This is another example. And again, that same white foot. I think maybe they cleaned these before they took the pictures, which is a good idea. But you notice on this one, this is a shape that sometimes happen on ewers and so forth. It's slightly V-shaped. All right, you have a slope on the outside, a slope on the inside, and then this nicely rounded foot that was cut a little bit. You can see a few little knife marks in here. Sometimes they clean them down with wet leather or cloth, just to clean the foot up a little on the wheel. They'd have it upside down and do it that way. And it has the artisanal leaf in the center, pretty typical. And then over here is a sleeve vase with an inscription. Nice deep dark cobalt blue. The cobalt on this vase is really nice, but you have that the body is white but has a bluish tinge to it. But the selection of cobalt is rich sapphire blue, not at all gray. It's very nice quality. And here's a picture of the bottom of it. Again, white, and nicely trimmed. It comes up to a slight V and then tapers down to the inside. The interior of this is also slightly concave. And you can see that the piece is made from very clean clay, beautifully done. Tiny imperfections, but very, very few. Really fine piece. And here's another example, a covered jar with a lid. Again, you have very good shading in the cobalt, nice deep colors, beautifully outlined, bluish tone to the glaze. And when you flip it over, again, that same white foot with that nice soft blue underbelly to it. And there is a firing crack in it. That's not uncommon on these. They often did that. And as long as it didn't go through the inside, and as they say, it will hold water, they generally let them go. They generally sold them rather than get rid of them. And again, you see the apron here of glaze slid down just a little bit on the inside when it was fired, but a good example of how the bottom of this should look. And then you have this nice-looking transitional jar with a long neck, honeycomb pattern, iron red, good deep cobalt. Always try to look at the colors separated in your mind and say, is that the color it should be? Because sometimes you'll see copies that have a tone of green, for example, that you've never seen on other transitional pieces. It's because they messed up when they picked their colors and they didn't use a legitimate one. All right. And when you flip this over, this is the bottom. Do you remember on the previous piece we talked about little bits of white clay that were adhering to the foot rim of the Wan Li box? Okay, well here you have a bit more kiln grit, obviously, stuck to the inside, got stuck in the paste, and they didn't really care too much, and they just left it. But you can see how they trimmed this foot, nicely trimmed, nice white pure clay, no browning, no staining, no messes. All right, and again on this jar, you have a good, strong, deep cobalt, sort of a rich gray. It's slightly grayer, but it's not gray. But it looks nice. And an iron red enameling all around it. And when you flip this thing over, here's the bottom. And you notice the bottom is also pretty dirty. The bottoms of these vases tended to be that way. The other transitional piece we looked at with the squirrels had the same coloring. But you notice the foot, where it's had some wear over the years and the dirt hasn't built up. It's good white pure paste. All right, this dirt is sitting on the surface, and I think of the spritz of oven cleaner that would come right off. Good soaping. All right, and here's another transitional sleeve vase with figures, the nice deep green enamels. Again, that slightly bluish tone, well potted, nice straight sides. And when you flip it over, this is the bottom of this. Slightly less white, but a lot of that is still dirt, but nicely done, concave. And again, you have that slight V shape coming up to the foot ridge here, okay? And those are good characteristics to see. All right, and then you have another one of these. This is a bottle vase or a bladder form vase. Very popular. They made lots of these. A lot of these found their way into Europe, and they're quite valuable. They sell today anywhere from, depending on the quality, $8,000 to $15,000. They do fake them, though, so you want to be careful. They are faking a lot of this stuff. It's funny because 25 years ago, they didn't fake too much in the way of transitional pieces and the late Ming Wan Li stuff. Today, they're doing all of it because all of it has become so valuable. But there's a good shot of the foot rim of this. You can actually see a little bit of the turning line from when they had it on the wheel, when they were cutting it back after it was thrown. And again, you have this nice white, this flower, almost flower white unglazed paste on the bottom, and that bluish tone in the center. All right. And here's a slip decorated example, beautiful piece. And when you flip this over on the back, here it is. And again, you have a bit more of this little bit of kiln grit here and there. Here's some kiln grit that got on the outside. They've added sort of the apocryphal chop mark to the middle. And again, a nice white paste. Okay. And over here is another example. I hope this isn't tedious, but you're seeing lots of examples. Come back to this video and look at it and really get it. Really get the idea, and then you won't make a mistake, or not as likely to. All right, and here you have an unglazed bottom, nicely turned, good squaring, knife trim base on it. A little bit dirty up in here, but that's normal. That's legitimate dirt to my eyes. But overall, it's quite refined. And here's a shot of the side of the foot, a clear one. Again, you can see the turning line. You can see little bits of kiln grit got up in here. You can see more turning lines there. All right. And then there was this. This is a big pair of jars that are in a house I was at a while ago. And one of them, unfortunately, got broken up in here. But these were big transitional 100 boy jars, and a pair of them, no less. Here's a picture of the bottom. Again, very similar to the other transitional bottom we saw before. Slightly dirty, slightly tanned out, but where it's been resting on surfaces for the last 300 years, it's white. And that's the color that's underneath this business here. All right. And then over here to the Lohan bowl, this was a nice one, and good cobalt blue, well drawn, very painterly, very nicely drawn. And here's a picture of the bottom of this. This one, the glaze stops on a razor's edge almost, steps in, and then you have this nice square hand-trimmed foot, slightly rounded, very typical, nice example. And then on to this. This was an example that actually came from the Green collection in Rhode Island. He was a mayor of Newport or something, but he started collecting to the Green Airport in Rhode Island's named after him. At any rate, this came out of his estate years ago. And a beautiful example, nicely enameled, had a later lid, of course, with a jade top finial added to it. But beautiful paste. And when you flip this over, again, it looks just like the other ones. That slight V shape here on the edge of the foot. Nice white paste. There's a splotch of glaze in the center, and that happens sometimes. One thing I wanted to mention, that a lot of the fakers nowadays, when they're making these, they're adding splotches of glaze to the underside. All right, because for years and years, if you saw that little splotch under there, it generally meant the piece was okay. So they've now added splotches of glaze, sort of running over the foot or in the middles here somewhere. Do not take that as a sign of authenticity. It's just something that happens. It happened in the day when these were made originally, and now they're back to doing it again. All right. And then the transitional cobalt blue jar. This is a beautiful example. We bought this years ago, and nicely done. Unbelievably deep, dark sapphire blue on this. Just fantastically done. And there's the bottom. Again, you have a little firing gap in the bottom. That didn't go through to the inside. The bottom on this was fairly thick. But again, you have that trimmed slight V edge on the foot. You have a few knife marks over here where they were cleaning it up. But good white paste, not a lot of iron oxide showing. All right. And that's it for the transitional pieces. Now we're going to take a look at Kangxi. Before we get going, I shouldn't have said it's just going to be Kangxi. We're going to include some mid-18th century examples in here as well, because they'll be instructive about foot characteristics, but it's going to be mostly Kangxi. All right, here is a Buddhist iron red altar stick. These were made sort of in the form of a stupa, and these were made during the Qianlong period, and they were made mostly for gifts to visiting Buddhists, or they were given to temples and so forth that the emperor was fond of. He just particularly liked this form, and they did not have marks on these. These were always unmarked, and this is what the foot rim looked on one of these: flat, even, straight, very precisely made with just tiny, tiny, tiny microscopic bits of imperfections, and a beautiful smooth glaze on the interior. These were quite nice, and they do turn up at the major auction houses from time to time, and they do quite well. They bring $40,000 to $70,000 depending on the day. All right, and then on to this, a grisaille decorated Chinese export teapot. All right, and this was a nice pot. It's got a little break in the handle here, but good, desirable decoration. And the reason I wanted to show it was, you notice on the bottom, again, you have that very nice white clay, that white paste, no iron oxide line on these. A lot of this export stuff didn't have that. But you, again, still from the late Ming and early Qing period, you had that bluish bottom. You still see them on here, and that nicely rounded, nicely trimmed, smooth foot. All right, and then here is a Kangxi triple gourd Celadon vase. All right, this is a nice example, and if you flip this over, you'll see the foot, again, is slightly V-shaped. Nice clean clay, no messing around with it. The inside of this is slightly convex, just a little bit, and you can see the turning marks on the interior. But notice how the glaze stopped absolutely perfectly on it, like a razor's edge running around that, that foot rim. Okay. And then over here was a Kangxi period incense burner with precious objects all over it. This is a good example. It had a nice deep dark cobalt blue on it, and all the objects were drawn very, very nicely. And the bottom of it is classic. Kangxi foot right there. Straight, very white, very dense and compact. The early porcelains, when they made them, the glazes were very dense and compact and very white. There is some red over here. That's not iron oxide. That's actually just, I remember looking at this, that's actually just rust from something that this thing sat on for a while, and it soaked up into the paste. It must have been on it for a long time. And again, you see the slight ridge from a knife trim. But that beautiful, compact, hard, dense white paste, something you don't generally see on the modern pieces. And then over here to a pair of jars, beautifully done. They didn't have their lids, unfortunately, but this was a nice set, nice greens in it. And here are the bottoms, okay? And you notice that they were made as a pair, but the bottoms are quite different. The cobalt on this one is darker. The foot rim the rims are about the same, but the color of the ground on the bottom of them aren't quite the same. This one has more little imperfections in it, and it's because they probably fired a number of these at the time, and then they paired them up afterwards because they all had the same patterns. But you're going to get slight variations in pairs. That doesn't mean they're not a pair, okay? And then over here to this is the back of a Kangxi dish or shallow bowl. Again, you have this very nice white, slightly leaning towards ivory in places, which Kangxi plates often do. But this nice tone here, and this beautifully shaped rim and all that. And here's the back of another one, all right, back to back. And again, this one has that same foot. This one's a little more finely done. It's a little thinner, which is normal. Not all foot rims and bases are going to be the same. Even when you have them in a set, you'll find variations, which is a good thing. But that's what the foot rim on this should look like, nice and smooth. And occasionally you see these little nicks out of the foot. There's one, there's one, there's one. And those are just slight imperfections. All right, and then over here to the Clampetts bowl, nice deep dark cobalt blue, Kangxi period, beautifully drawn vines, and here's the foot on it. Classic, very refined foot, nice old Kangxi foot, but they pulled this very thin, very neatly done, slightly convex bottom, and this snow white foot rim, very typical. And a Kangxi jar with lid. This is a good example. It's got all these different cartouches all over it. I love that. And here's a picture of the bottom of this. This is a bigger piece. Again, you're seeing this sort of just aged dirt bottom, but look at the turnings. You can really see the turnings on this. But again, where the piece has been sitting and rubbing and riding on tabletops, you see what's underneath, that nice white foot, that nice pure white paste. And you can actually see over here the legitimate dirt got into the little knife cuts that they made. All right, but that's normal. And here's the underside of the lid. That part never touches much, so it stayed much cleaner. All right, and now over here, a really elegant yen vase with fabulously deep, dark cobalt blue. The shading and all this, the outlining of the heron, the deer, it's beautifully done. And when you flip this thing over, there's the foot again, that same foot rim, snow white. If you see areas where it looks a little dirty, find a spot where it hasn't been rubbing and getting dirt, legitimate dirt ground into it to get a sense of it. Sometimes you can, if you're at an auction, you can get a little piece of tissue or something and put a little spit on it or something and clean the foot off to see what it looks like underneath if you're uncertain. And that's what it should look like. It should be nice and white and smooth. You see a few knife marks in there where the artist cleaned up his work a little before he fired it. Nice example. And here's another one. This is cobalt blue with underglaze red, just a little bit of underglaze red. You don't see a lot of underglaze red on Kangxi because underglaze red was very hard to control because it developed its color at different temperatures than cobalt, and often it turned black, or it could even turn green in some cases. And here you have this nice deep dark cobalt blue. So they spent their time making sure the blue came out the best because of the overall coloring of the vase. And here's a picture of the bottom. Again, white, where it's been rubbing on a surface, V-shaped. There is some dirt on the inside. And here you have little blotchy areas, sort of skin-colored blotches, and that's just where the glaze wasn't quite thick enough and so forth. But you look at the way this little fungi was done, nice and neat and tidy. That's a nice example of a genuine Kangxi piece. And here's a side shot of that foot rim. Again, you really can see how dense and hard and fine that cobalt, that paste is when you look at it carefully. And that's what you want to look for. You want to look for that foot. Here's a picture of a vase, again with precious objects all over it, Kangxi period. This has a softer blue on it, but I like the incense burners and the books and all that business. Very attractive. And here's the foot rim on this. Again, pretty typical. This one's pretty dirty. They should have cleaned it up maybe a little bit. But over here you can see what the paste looks like underneath here and here. And that's what you want to focus your attention on. The dirty areas, if it's legitimate dirt, that's perfectly fine. It will wash right off. And it was a nice looking jar. And then over here to this late 18th century sort of Rockefeller pattern rimmed famille rose dish. Had a little bit of wear to it. It was a nice, interesting piece, but I wanted to show the bottom of this also. This has the sort of tipped-in V-shaped foot, white paste all the way around, no impurities that you can see even. And the back of the plate is white, but it still has that bluish tinge. And this was made, in the 1790s, 1780s, up in that era. And then we're back to Kangxi. This was a good example of vibrant colors, nice drawing, nice rim on it, in good shape. And again, the porcelain had a little slight gray to it. Either Kangxi blue and white tended to be very, very white, but sometimes the enamel pieces sometimes had a little bit of a tone to them, not always. And here is another Kangxi eyepiece. Here's a picture of the back of the foot rim. Very tight. These sort of grooved foot rims were popular for getting onto stands and so forth. Nice and white, nicely trimmed, very neat. The modern ones tend to have sort of a sandy texture to them, and they tend to be much too tan at times. But they're not refined. They're not in dense and pure white like this down in here. All right, now let's mosey on over to this Kangxi vase with Immortals. Beautiful example, nice white body, nice enamels, beautifully decorated all the way around. And when you flip the bottom over, there again, you have that Kangxi foot rim, nicely trimmed. These guys, when they potted them, you have to understand, they didn't have a school that mandated how they trimmed foot rims. They were just taught as potters that when you throw a piece, you pull the clay, you trim the foot. you cut it off the wheel, you flip the thing over, and they often trim them on a wheel. They put it on the wheel, center it, get it spinning, and then trim that foot up, just so it would be nice and neat and would stand up straight on a hard surface. And that's what you did here. And they did it all by eye, which is quite fantastic. And here's another one, another Kangxi vase, interesting one of warriors. And again, there's that foot again, very similar to the last one, slightly thicker, but again, all hand trimmed, very white. No mud has been dumped onto it. And then just a quick basic underglaze to the bottom, nothing fancy. And then you have this, the Yongchen vase. Just after Kangxi came Yongchen, his second son. And this was a nice one. The shape is a well-known form from that period. There are pronk vases in this shape as well. And when you click over, here's the bottom of this. You can see the turning marks, and you can really see the knife marks on the bottom of this. They really must have had a rough bottom on this thing. They had to cut it back quite a bit. But beautifully done, nice and neat, slightly concave. Here's that white underside of the lid that looked just like the white underside to that other lid on the, what was it, a late Ming piece. All right, there it is again. And then this Kangxi charger. We talked about this Kangxi charger in the other video because I liked it so much. Somehow, I think it sold for 25 or so thousand. Had a break on the back. But beautiful example, nice colors. And when you flip it over, you have this this right over here. There's that white foot that you want to see up in here. So for the slightly tan on the outside, slightly dirty, you see it's splotchy. And that's probably from being on a stand or something at some point. But there's the real color in here. So if you bought this, you could certainly clean it up. All right. And again, the back of the plate is sort of a nice soft bluish tone to it. And then the pair of Kangxi sleeve vases. These were very nice. And here's the bottoms to them. Okay, now they are a pair, and as we saw in that other pair of jars, the foot rims on pairs don't always match up. The bottoms don't always match up. These are pretty good. The circles on the bottoms are about the same and so forth. But you can see that there is a difference in the paste, the tonality of the paste. Presumably, they've been together all this time. But this one was a little bit darker and grayer from over time. And again, as I said, these would clean up most likely, and they'd be nice and white again. But that's what's underneath the gunk, I think, on the other vase as well, nice and white. And then you have these Yongchen to early Qianlong period dishes, and again you have this back. Now you have, this is a color, this sort of darker skin tone you see sometimes. It's not brown so much as it is sort of a tannish pink color, or light tan. But again, V-shaped, very pure. You notice right here, there are no impurities showing at all. Very, very clean paste they used to make these. And it's one of the ways you can spot them because the later ones are kind of gritty and crappy looking. All right, and then here is a pair of Kangxi Amari jars with the Kirin and the Phoenix. Good looking bodies, brown dressings on the lids. And when you flip them over, here are the bottoms, and those are what again, that V-shaped foot rim, beautifully done, nice paste. There's a bit of dirt in a few places and on the inside, but in general, they're nice and white, and they're very white under the lids. Notice how white those lids are, the edges of the lids. All right, pretty typical. And then the Kangxi pair of Femi-Vert jars. All right, that they sold. I think these brought about 25,000. I thought they were a very good buy. And here's a picture of the underside. This has been cleaned up at some point. And you can see the slight oranging on here from the bottom, from a tiny bit of orange iron oxide, perhaps, legitimately done. And then you have this nice white dense foot all the way around. And you can see where it's rested on surfaces and it's remained nice and white. Here's the underside of the lid. Looks a little dirty, but it's okay. And here's the underside of another jar. The jar itself wasn't that interesting to me, but I wanted to show the foot because this one has a fair bit of iron oxide on the inside of the foot, but you notice it doesn't come over because it would have worn off by now. But again, a nice white paste. All right, now, oh, there's a close-up of it. This is a good close-up of a foot. Now you can see the edge of the knife where they actually trimmed it, okay? And then you see this sort of oatmeal-y texture in the middle where it was turned. They didn't polish it down. They just cleaned it up, took it off the wheel, and that was it. And you have that very nice, neat iron oxide line, especially noticeable right up in here. And notice it doesn't come to the foot. It doesn't go anywhere. It just stays right there. All right, and then on to this, the 18th century export blue and white tea caddy box. This is a beautiful example that we sold years ago. I kept pictures of it because I just loved it. It's quite unusual. And there's a picture of the bottom right there. And you notice it has this this crossing thing on here, which is what held it during the firing. You also see this on very early Ming pieces, Ming jars especially. You'll see this on the bottom, this for the firing stand. But nice white paste revealed up in here, and a slightly tannish tone to the middle, but white on the corners, white where it's been resting on surfaces. All right. And then over to this, the Kangxi dragon dish. Nice example. Came through here a couple of years ago. Good decoration all the way around. Here's the foot rim. You can see the little bit of turnings. This was a very dirty foot. I remember this, but you can look how white it is where it's been on a surface. Nice and dense. Not a lot of gritty inclusions in it. Nothing like that. Just beautifully done, and it's a good piece. There's an overall shot of it right there, and again you clearly see where it sat on a stand of some kind or just a tabletop for a long time. And then another Kangxi example this type of Kangxi plate was exported fairly often to Europe. Beautifully done. This came actually in a set. I think there was a set of 8 or 10 of these. And again, you have that slight ivory tone to the foot rim, but you also have these little nips out of it that I mentioned before that you see sometimes after the firing. And here is some more. But again, nice, pure, unstained paste showing on the bottom. All right, it was a beautiful decoration and nice quality paste. And then onto this, the standing Lohan Immortal, a nice example. This is a firing on biscuit, and that's what the bottom of it looks like. It's a little bit rustic, but you notice it hasn't been stained or fooled around with. It's just nicely done. And this came out from a collector that had bought a lot of things from Ralph Chait in New York, who was one of the great dealers of the 20th century, and they're still there, the 21st century, am I saying? And this was the figure itself, beautiful Kangxi figure. And then onto this, the conjoined twist spirit bottles or vinaigrettes, they call them sometimes. This is molded, beautifully done. And the foot on this is quite unusual. It has a fairly flat, wide foot. You can see where the glaze ends, nice and neat. But that's how these are done. And then the bottom is glazed right up to the edge, and the interior has moldings and so forth, and it's all glazed with a little blue device in the center. And then on to this, the plate. This is a fairly well-known commercial plate that they exported a lot of. Many of you have seen these. And here's the back of it with that grooved foot again. All right, nice dark cobalt blue, nice foot. One of the things I've noticed about these, when you see it isn't always the case because I've seen a few exceptions, but on these, often the copies, the height of the outside track and the inside track are the same. And on the old examples, the inside edge tends to be a bit lower. All right, so it doesn't always prove it's authentic if the inside foot is lower, but if it seems to me that if the height of both foot rims, the inner and outer, are the same height, thickness, there's a pretty good chance there's something wrong with it. I don't know why, but that just seems how it's been lately. All right, and then you have this nice Kangxi Datsai bowl. And notice the foot on this. This is a very fine little bowl, but notice how finely done that foot is. Beautifully polished down, perfectly rounded, nice white color. And you look down here away from the light a little bit, still nice and white. You see a few indications of hand trimming with a knife, and beautiful looking little bowl. And then on to these, the Qinlong offering stand. These are beautiful. And here's a picture of the foot on this, the rain mark on the inside. It's upside down here, but nicely done. And again, you can see over here how white that foot is, how white the paste is, and how nicely the glaze ends right at the foot. And then there's a Kangxi Celadon incise decorated jar with a later silver top on it. The silver top was probably added in the late 18th, early 19th century. But a good example. And again, we're going to see that same kind of foot. This foot was very dirty. I remember this. Again, you have that same, those tan splotches that we talked about earlier. Here they are again, with little black dots in the middle that help create them. But you notice where the foot has been resting on a hard surface, white as snow, very pure, very pure. And then over here is a big slip decorated Celadon 18th century jar. This was a fairly provincial one. You know right away by looking at it, by the way this is done. It's not fantastically elegantly done. It's a little angular, little provincial. So when you flip it over, expect to see a little bit of a provincial foot, and you do. It's a little bit dirty. There's some white areas here, slightly convex bottom with a recessed edging, but nicely rounded, nicely finished, very thick glaze stopping just above the foot. That glaze was very thick. That was about a 1/4 inch thick coming off of that, and that's what it should look like. All right, and then you have this, the crosshatch decorated cobalt. I call this crosshatching when they went both directions. Kangxi beaker vase, and here's a picture of the bottom of this. Again, it's kind of dirty up in here. You can see, and it even chipped out in a spot. But notice how nice and white it is down here. That nice pure white color, and that's what you look for consistently on these. All right, and then this, the Meiping Celadon vase. The first thing you should notice is that the foot where the glaze stops is just as straight as an arrow. All right, and that right away should tell you, and it's thick, should tell you it could be Kangxi period. All right, and that brown dressing on the top of the mouth, beautiful thing. And here's a picture of the foot rim, a bit of iron oxide running around it, but nice white foot, and then some more iron oxide on the inside of the foot. But the top of the foot and around here, it's all nice and white. Even though this was very dirty, it still looked pretty white. And then you have a pair of Kangxi jars with enamels with birds. There's no underglaze blue on this. It's all overglaze. And here's a picture of the bottom. And again, you have that same shaped foot that we've seen on other jars and vases from this period. Kangxi, this was sold by Marchants and Samuel Marchant in London years ago. And again, you have that nicely done foot, beautifully done white. This one's dirtier for some reason, but this one has looked, for some reason, managed to stay cleaner. And that's a good example, all right? But beautifully done. And you notice this one has a few more impurities in here. And this may have not had, this was the body of this underneath. They were probably made at the same time at the same place, but the clay may not have been as good on that batch as it was on the one on the right. But I think a lot of this grime and gook would come off if you took a little time to clean it gently. Okay, and that's about it for these. I hope you found this useful. Look for it again if I went too fast. But we put a blog on the site, on the bitamount.com site, with most of these images on there, so you can go and click through them anytime. It's dating porcelain by their feet. And we also included in that same blog Qing, mid-Qing, and later Qing examples. I think there's a couple of Republican pieces in there for you to look at for comparison as well. But I hope this is useful to all of you, and we'll be working on another one to come later. We had to gather up an awful lot of pictures to do this. All right. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.